The laughter and clinking glasses faded into a heavy silence the moment Damian pulled his hand away from mine, right in the middle of our 5th anniversary party. "Adrian, I can't pretend anymore," he said, his voice cracking as the colorful lights from the rooftop garden in New York reflected in his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name: pain, maybe regret. Everyone turned to look, our friends frozen with drinks in hand, his parents standing stiffly by the dessert table. He turned and walked toward the exit, leaving me standing there alone under the glowing string lights, the ring box in my pocket suddenly feeling like a lead weight. That was the moment everything I thought I knew about us shattered. I stood frozen for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds, the warm June breeze carrying the scent of fresh flowers and expensive cologne across the rooftop terrace. The city skyline sparkled below us like a promise we had made to each other years ago, back when we first met at that little coffee shop in Chelsea. Damian had been the confident lawyer in a crisp suit ordering a black coffee, and I was the graphic designer sketching logos on a napkin, laughing at his dry jokes about corporate life. 5 years later, here we were, or at least I was, surrounded by the life we had built together. Friends who had cheered us through every milestone, colleagues who respected our open relationship in the professional world, and even a few family members who had slowly come around. But now, with Damian's back disappearing through the glass doors, none of that mattered. The party continued in awkward murmurs, someone dimming the music as if that could soften the blow. My best friend Marcus was the first to reach me, his hand gentle on my shoulder. "Adrian, what the hell just happened?" he whispered, his eyes wide with concern. Marcus had been there from the beginning, the one who introduced us at that Pride event in 2019 when the world felt like it was opening up for guys like us. I shook my head, unable to form words yet, my throat tight with the kind of disbelief that comes when the person you love most chooses the door over the future you planned. The ring box burned against my thigh as I slipped it deeper into my pocket. The simple platinum band I had picked out weeks ago, now a secret that would stay hidden. Guests started to disperse politely, offering half smiles and excuses about early mornings, but I could feel their pity like a weight on my chest. Damian's mother, Eleanor, lingered near the bar, her face pale and composed in that way only old-money families from Connecticut could manage. She had never fully embraced our life together, always referring to us as roommates in front of her bridge club friends. But tonight she looked almost relieved as she gathered her coat. I made my way to the edge of the rooftop, gripping the railing as the city lights blurred through unshed tears. How had we gotten here? Just last month we had been laughing over takeout in our Brooklyn brownstone, planning this very party down to the last detail, the string quartet, the custom cocktails named after our inside jokes, the photo booth with props from our trips to the Hamptons and Aspen. Damian had seemed happy then, or at least I thought so. His job at the firm had been stressful with a big merger looming, but he always came home to me, collapsing into my arms with stories about courtroom victories and late-night strategy sessions. We had fought the world together. My conservative parents in Ohio who took years to stop sending me Bible verses after I came out. His own family's quiet disapproval that hung like a shadow over every holiday. But we had chosen each other every day, building a home filled with books and art and the kind of love that felt unbreakable. Until tonight, Marcus guided me to a quiet corner table, handing me a glass of water instead of more champagne. "Talk to me, man. Did you two fight earlier?" He looked like he was about to break. I shook my head again, replaying the last hour in my mind. Damian had been charming all evening, toasting to our years together with that easy smile that first drew me in. Then his phone had buzzed during the speeches, and after a quick glance at the screen, his face changed. He pulled me aside for what I thought was a private moment, but instead he said those words and walked away. No explanation, no fight, just gone. The pain was sharp like a crack spreading through glass, but beneath it was something else. Confusion, yes, but also the first flicker of anger that made me wonder if I had been blind to the cracks all along. By the time the last guests left, the venue staff quietly clearing tables, I was alone in the elevator descending to the street. The cab ride home to our empty apartment felt endless, the familiar streets of Williamsburg passing by in a haze. I unlocked the door to find Damian's keys missing from the bowl, his favorite leather jacket gone from the hook. The silence pressed in, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. I sank onto the couch, the one we had picked out together on a rainy Saturday, and let the tears come. 5 years of building a life, of choosing love over fear, and now this. But even in the raw hurt, a small voice whispered that maybe this wasn't the end I thought it was. Maybe, just maybe, the man who walked away carried more pain than I realized. Little did I know how true that would turn out to be as the days unfolded into a journey I never expected. I barely slept that night, replaying every conversation from the past month. Damian had been distant at times, canceling our usual Sunday brunches with friends and spending extra hours at the office. I chalked it up to work the way lawyers do when big cases hit. But now, sitting in the dark living room with only the glow of my phone screen for company, I wondered about the late texts he dismissed as client emergencies and the way he avoided talking about future plans like buying a house upstate. Our friends had always said we were the perfect couple, the artist and the advocate, balancing each other out in a city that could swallow you whole. Yet here I was, alone with questions that had no answers. By morning, the sun filtering through our floor-to-ceiling windows, I made a decision. I wouldn't chase him immediately. I would give him space, but I would also start facing the pieces of myself I had put aside for us. Little steps, like calling my sister back in Ohio who had always been my quiet supporter, or reaching out to the therapist I had seen briefly after coming out. The party had been meant to celebrate us, but maybe it was the beginning of me learning who I was without him. The next few days blurred into a routine of avoidance and quiet reflection. I called in sick to the design studio where I worked on branding campaigns for tech startups, something I had built from the ground up after moving to New York fresh out of college. My boss, a no-nonsense woman named Lena who had become like family, didn't press for details when I mumbled something about a family emergency. She knew about Damian, everyone at the office did, from the pride flags on my desk to the joint holiday parties we hosted. But explaining the abandonment felt impossible, like admitting failure in a life I had fought so hard to claim. Instead, I wandered the streets of Brooklyn, stopping at our favorite cafes where baristas still asked about him with that knowing smile. Each time I shook my head and ordered my usual latte alone, the ache deepened. Marcus stopped by on the third day with Thai takeout and a six-pack, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. We sat on the fire escape overlooking the neighborhood rooftops, the kind of view that had made us fall in love with the apartment in the first place. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said, cracking open a beer and handing it to me. "But you do need to talk." What did his text say? Damian had sent one message the morning after, "I need time. Please don't call yet," and nothing since. No explanation, no apology, just silence that echoed louder than any argument we had ever had. I told Marcus about the party, the way Damian's eyes had darted to his phone right before everything fell apart, and how his parents had left without saying goodbye to me. Eleanor had always been polite but distant, her hugs stiff as if touching me might confirm something she preferred to ignore. Damian's father, a retired judge, had never hidden his disappointment that his only son chose this lifestyle over the family firm back in Connecticut. As we talked late into the night, memories flooded back. I remembered our first date, a simple walk through Central Park where Damian opened up about growing up in a home where being gay was never discussed, only tolerated in whispers. His parents sent him to therapy as a teenager to straighten him out, and even after he came out in college, the pressure lingered like an invisible chain. I had shared my own story, the tearful coming out to my Ohio family that led to months of silence from my father, the quiet support from my mother that kept me going. We bonded over those scars, promising each other we would build something better, free from the weight of other people's expectations. Now, sitting there with Marcus, I wondered if Damian had been carrying more of that weight than he let on. The law firm where he worked was progressive on paper, but boardrooms still favored the straight family man image for partnerships. He had turned down promotions before to avoid the travel that would keep us apart, but lately the late nights had increased. The following week brought more pieces of the puzzle when I ran into our mutual friend Sarah at the gym. She hugged me tightly, her eyes sympathetic. I saw Damian yesterday at the coffee shop near his office. He looked wrecked, Adrian. He mentioned something about a call from his uncle, the one who's always pushing the family legacy thing. That hit like a punch. Damian's extended family had a long history in conservative politics, and any hint of our relationship in the wrong circles could complicate things for his career. I spent that evening scrolling through old photos on my phone, stopping at one from our trip to Fire Island last summer. We had danced under the stars, carefree and in love, far from the city's pressures. But even then, I recalled a moment when Damian stepped away to take a call. His shoulders tense as he spoke in low tones. I had brushed it off, but now it felt like a clue. My sister Emily called from Ohio that weekend, her voice warm over the speakerphone as I paced the apartment. "You sound like you're holding it together, but I know you, little brother. Remember when Dad finally showed up to your college graduation after 2 years of barely speaking? Took time, but he came around because he saw how strong you were. Maybe Damian needs to find his own strength right now." Her words stayed with me as I started journaling late at night, something the therapist had suggested years ago. Writing down the good times, the lazy Sundays reading books side by side, the way Damian always knew exactly how I took my coffee, the quiet pride in his eyes when my designs won awards, helped, but so did admitting the frustrations. The times he canceled plans with my family because the pressure felt too heavy, the subtle ways he pulled back when conversations turned to marriage or kids. I had always been the one pushing for more openness, believing love could conquer the world's judgment. Now, alone, I started to see how my optimism might have overlooked his quiet battles. By the end of the second week, I decided to reach out to a support group for partners of men dealing with identity issues, something I found through an LGBT center in the village. The first meeting was in a cozy basement room filled with guys who shared stories eerily similar to mine. Boyfriends who loved deeply but crumbled under family expectations or workplace bias. One man, a teacher named Ryan, described how his partner had walked away during a family reunion, only to return months later after therapy. "Sometimes the one who leaves is the one drowning," he said quietly. Those words lodged in my chest, planting the first seed of understanding. I wasn't ready to forgive or forget, but the anger was softening into curiosity. What if Damian's departure wasn't rejection but a desperate bid for air? The thought kept me up at night, but it also gave me purpose. I threw myself into work, finishing a major campaign for a queer-owned startup that celebrated visibility, channeling the pain into something creative and empowering. Friends noticed the change, Marcus joking that I looked less like a kicked puppy and more like a guy figuring shit out. He was right. The abandonment had cracked me open, but in the pieces, I was starting to see a stronger version of myself emerging. One who didn't need to be the fixer in every relationship. Damian still hadn't called, but I stopped checking my phone every hour. Instead, I took long runs along the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn, the city waking up around me, a reminder that life moved forward, whether you were ready or not. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, I pulled out the ring box again. The band gleamed under the lamplight, simple and timeless like the promise I had wanted to make. I didn't know if I would ever give it to him, but holding it now felt different. Less like loss and more like a question about what I truly deserved. The journey was just beginning, and for the first time since that night on the rooftop, I felt a quiet determination settling in. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be the one left broken. The months stretched on with a rhythm I hadn't anticipated, work deadlines pulling me into long hours at the studio, evenings spent at the gym or coffee with Marcus and Sarah, and quiet weekends reorganizing the apartment to make space for just me. I boxed up some of Damian's things that he hadn't come for yet. A stack of legal thrillers on the shelf, his spare running shoes by the door. Not out of spite, but to breathe easier in the space we had shared. Each item brought a memory, like the night we argued over paint colors for the living room and ended up laughing until we cried. But packing them away also felt like reclaiming territory, a small act of self-care in the middle of uncertainty. New York in July was humid and alive, the streets buzzing with festivals and street fairs that I forced myself to attend, reminding me that the city belonged to me too. Then came the first real confrontation, not with Damian but with his past. Eleanor called one afternoon while I was sketching concepts for a new client. Her voice was measured, the way it always was, but there was an undercurrent of exhaustion. "Adrian, I know this is awkward, but Damian's been staying with us in Connecticut. He's not himself. The firm is pushing him for a big case, and you know how his father gets about appearances." She paused, and I could picture her in their manicured garden, the same one where Damian and I had spent tense Thanksgivings trying to fit in. I asked the question that had been burning since the party. "Did something happen with the family? He left so suddenly." She sighed, a rare crack in her composure. "His uncle mentioned a potential donation to the firm tied to traditional values." Damian took it hard. "He always tried to shield you from that side of things." The call ended with her promising to tell him I asked about him, but the revelation lingered. Damian had been protecting me all along, carrying the weight of generational expectations that I had only glimpsed. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner at our usual Italian spot in the village. She listened as I recounted the conversation, her fork pausing mid-twirl. "He's always been the strong one on the surface, but remember that time at Pride when he froze up around those protesters? You talked him through it, but I think parts of him never fully let go of the fear. We talked late, dissecting the relationship with the honesty only good friends can offer." Sarah pointed out how I had always been the emotional anchor, planning trips and holidays while Damian handled the practical side bills, investments, the steady job. "Maybe he felt like he was failing you by not being able to shake off the old baggage," she said gently. Her words hit home, stirring memories of arguments where Damian shut down instead of opening up, his silence a wall I had learned to respect but never fully scaled. Work became my sanctuary. I poured energy into a campaign for an LGBT youth organization, designing visuals that celebrated coming-out stories with bold colors and authentic faces. The team loved it, and for the first time in weeks, I felt proud of something that was purely mine. My boss Lena pulled me aside one Friday. "Whatever's going on, it's fueling some of your best work. Keep that fire." Her encouragement meant more than she knew, echoing the support I had found in the partner group meetings. Ryan from the group had become a regular sounding board, sharing how his own boyfriend's departure led to months of therapy that uncovered deep-seated shame from childhood. "The hurt runs deeper when you've spent years hiding pieces of yourself," he said during one session. I started seeing parallels in Damian, the way he deflected questions about marriage, the subtle tension whenever my family visited and openly embraced us. Mid-month brought an unexpected visit from my mother. She flew in from Ohio for a long weekend, her suitcase filled with homemade cookies and the quiet strength that had carried our family through my coming out. We walked through Central Park, the same paths Damian and I had strolled countless times. "You look different, honey, stronger," she observed over iced tea on a bench. I told her everything, from the party to Eleanor's call, and she listened without judgment. Love isn't always about staying together. Sometimes it's about giving each other room to grow, even if it hurts like hell. Her words resonated, reminding me of the years she had bridged the gap with my father until he finally attended my first gallery show. That weekend we visited museums and talked late into the nights, her presence a balm that helped me process the betrayal without letting it define me. By the end of the month, I received a short email from Damian. "I'm sorry for the way I left. I need to figure some things out on my own. Please take care of yourself." No details, no promises, but it was contact. I stared at the screen for hours before replying simply, "I am. You too." The exchange didn't heal the wound, but it shifted something inside me. Anger gave way to empathy as I imagined him in his childhood home, wrestling with the same demons that had haunted him since we met. Friends noticed the change too. Marcus joked that I was leveling up, and I started dating casually, nothing serious, just coffee meetups that reminded me I was worthy of connection on my terms. The identity crisis I had feared after the abandonment never fully materialized. Instead, I discovered layers of resilience I didn't know I had, forged in the fire of that rooftop night. The city kept turning, and so did I, one deliberate step at a time toward a future that felt authentically mine. Summer faded into fall, the leaves in Prospect Park turning gold as I marked 3 months since the party. Life had settled into a new normal. Early mornings at the gym, focus days at the studio where my designs were gaining traction for a national campaign, and evenings volunteering at the LGBT center. The partner support group had become a lifeline, with Ryan and a few others forming an informal crew that met for hikes on weekends. We shared stories of heartbreak and healing, and through theirs I pieced together more of what Damian might be facing. One guy described how his ex had left because family ultimatums threatened his inheritance. Another talked about workplace discrimination that forced him back into the closet. Their experiences mirrored the pressures Damian had hinted at over the years but never fully voiced. A turning point came when I ran into Damian's coworker at a networking event downtown. The young associate, fresh out of law school, pulled me aside after recognizing me from firm parties. Damian's been on leave for weeks. The merger went through, but he turned down the promotion. Said something about needing to align his life differently. The news stunned me. Damian had always chased those milestones, the corner office and the prestige that came with it. Hearing he had walked away from it suggested a deeper reckoning, one that made my own growth feel connected to his somehow. I didn't reach out immediately, respecting the space he had asked for, but the information fueled late-night reflections where I journaled about the imbalances in our relationship. I had been the dreamer, pushing for openness and adventures, while he managed the realities, shielding me from his family's barbs, navigating the subtle biases at work. Maybe my insistence on perfection had added to his burden without me realizing it. Family dynamics shifted too when my father called unexpectedly. For years after I came out, our conversations had been polite but strained, focused on weather and sports rather than real life. Now, with Mom's encouragement, he asked about Damian directly. "Your mother told me what happened. I'm sorry, son. I know I wasn't always supportive, but seeing you build something real with him made me proud." The admission cracked open old wounds and began healing them. We talked for over an hour, him sharing his own regrets about how his traditional upbringing had clouded his judgment. It was a conversation I wish Damian could have had with his own father, but it gave me perspective on how generational pain echoes forward unless someone breaks the cycle. Inspired, I wrote a long letter to Damian, not sending it yet, but pouring out years of unspoken understanding about the weight he carried. The act of writing it freed something in me, turning the abandonment from a wound into a catalyst for deeper self-awareness. Work brought its own breakthroughs. The queer youth campaign I led won an industry award, and at the ceremony in a sleek Manhattan ballroom, I stood on stage accepting it with a speech that surprised even me. This work is about visibility and resilience, choosing to live authentically even when the world pushes back. The applause was genuine, and afterward colleagues and strangers approached with stories of their own journeys. Marcus was there, beaming like a proud brother, and Sarah brought flowers. In that moment, surrounded by the community I had helped build through my art, the loneliness of the past months lifted. I realized I wasn't defined by being someone's partner anymore. I was Adrian, the designer, the friend, the man who had survived public humiliation and emerged with purpose. Damian texted once in October, a simple happy birthday, with a photo of the scarf I had left at his parents' house years ago. It was tucked in his message like an olive branch, but I replied with gratitude and nothing more. The exchange felt like progress, not reconciliation. Friends encouraged me to date more seriously, and I tried. A few dinners with a kind architect named Alex who shared my love for city walks. But something held me back from diving in fully. The lessons from the group echoed. True growth comes from understanding your patterns first. Alex and I parted amicably, both agreeing the timing wasn't right, and I felt no regret, only clarity. Fall brought colder winds and shorter days, but inside me, a steady warmth grew, the kind forged from facing hard truths about love, identity, and the courage it takes to let go. One crisp evening, I attended a panel at the Center on Societal Pressures in Same-Sex Relationships. The speakers, therapists, and advocates discussed how external forces like family disapproval and career expectations could erode even the strongest bonds. A gay man in his 40s shared how his partner had left after years of silent suffering, only for them to reconnect years later as friends who understood each other's pain better. His story resonated deeply, planting the idea that perhaps Damian and I weren't over in the traditional sense, but transforming into something new. As I walked home through the bustling streets, past couples holding hands openly in ways we once fought for, I felt a profound gratitude for the path that had led me here. The man who had been abandoned wasn't broken. He was rebuilding with intention. And somewhere in Connecticut, I hope Damian was doing the same, even if our timelines didn't align yet. The city lights guided me forward, a reminder that every ending holds the seed of a stronger beginning. Winter arrived with its usual bite, blanketing New York in snow that muffled the usual chaos and gave the city a hushed beauty. I spent the holidays quietly, splitting time between Brooklyn and a quick trip to Ohio where my family welcomed me with open arms and no awkward questions about Damian. Dad even hung a photo of me accepting the award in the living room, a small but meaningful gesture that spoke volumes. Back in the city, I threw myself into a new project, redesigning the branding for a national LGBT mental health initiative. The work felt personal, each logo and color choice informed by the months of introspection and group discussions. Ryan from the support circle collaborated with me on some visuals, his insights adding authenticity that clients praised. "You're channeling everything into this," he said one afternoon over coffee, and he was right. The pain had become fuel, transforming confusion into creative clarity. A breakthrough came in mid-January when Damian called. His voice was tired but steady over the line, the first real conversation since the party. "Adrian, I owe you more than a text. Can we meet?" We agreed on neutral ground, a quiet cafe near Union Square, away from our old haunts. The day of the meeting, snow flurries danced outside as I arrived early, heart pounding but surprisingly calm. Damian looked different, thinner, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. But there was a resolve in his posture I hadn't seen in years. We hugged awkwardly, the familiar scent of his cologne stirring memories, but I pulled back first, signaling boundaries. Over steaming mugs of tea, he opened up in ways he never had before. The uncle's call at the party had been an ultimatum tied to the family trust fund, pressuring him to settle down properly or risk losing support that indirectly funded his pro bono work for underserved communities. "I panicked," he admitted, eyes downcast. "All those years I thought I was protecting us by keeping quiet, but it was eating me alive. Leaving was the only way I could face it without dragging you down." His confession poured out. The therapy sessions he had started in secret, the nights he lay awake questioning if his love was enough when his own identity felt fractured by childhood conditioning. He described how the promotion offer had come with expectations to hide our relationship during client events, a compromise he could no longer make. "You were always so strong, Adrian. So out and proud. I admired it, but it highlighted everything I was still hiding." I listened without interrupting, the pieces finally clicking into place. The misunderstandings, the silences, the way he had sacrificed parts of himself to keep the peace. It wasn't betrayal in the cruel sense, but a desperate act of self-preservation. When he finished, tears in his eyes, I shared my side too. The humiliation at the party, the slow rebuilding, the discovery that I could stand alone and thrive. We didn't resolve everything that afternoon, but we agreed to keep talking. No pressure for reconciliation, just honesty. The conversation marked a pivot. Over the following weeks, we met a few more times, each one peeling back layers. Damian had moved into a small apartment in Manhattan, attending weekly therapy, and even joining a men's group focused on masculinity and sexuality. His parents, surprisingly, had started their own counseling after seeing how the family pressure had nearly broken their son. Eleanor reached out to me once, her voice softer than before. "Thank you for giving him space. We're all learning." I found myself forgiving more easily than expected, not because I wanted to rush back, but because understanding his pain freed me from carrying it as my own failure. Friends reacted with cautious support. Marcus wary at first, then warming as he saw my continued growth. Sarah organized a low-key dinner where Damian joined briefly, the group dynamic shifting but still warm. Professionally, my career soared. The mental health campaign launched to acclaim, leading to speaking gigs at industry events where I shared my story of emotional resilience without naming names. Sometimes the hardest love teaches us the most about ourselves. I told one audience, the words ringing true in ways I couldn't have imagined months earlier. Personally, I started seeing Alex again casually, but this time with clear communication about my healing process. He respected it, and we built a friendship that felt healthy and unpressured. Through it all, Damian and I maintained contact, our exchanges evolving from painful history to shared reflections on growth. He sacrificed the family expectations he once clung to, and I sacrificed the illusion of control I had held in our relationship. The mutual understanding brought a peace I hadn't known was possible. As February thawed into early spring, I reflected on the journey during a solo hike in upstate New York. The trails were quiet, the air crisp, and for the first time, the future felt wide open rather than defined by loss. Damian had become a friend in the truest sense, someone who had walked through fire and emerged changed, just as I had. The abandonment that shocked everyone that summer night had revealed truths about love, identity, and sacrifice that strengthened us both separately. The man I once planned forever with had taught me that real strength sometimes means stepping away, and in doing so, he had unknowingly set me free to become the best version of myself. Spring bloomed fully by the time Damian and I sat on a bench in Central Park, the same one from our first date years earlier. Cherry blossoms drifted on the breeze as we shared updates. His new role at a smaller firm focused on civil rights cases, my upcoming exhibition featuring work inspired by personal awakening. The conversation flowed easily now, laced with the kind of laughter that comes from surviving storms together. He looked healthier, the shadows gone from his eyes, and when he spoke about his therapy breakthroughs, there was genuine pride. I finally told my dad everything, no more hiding. It wasn't perfect, but he listened. I smiled, proud of the man he was becoming, the sacrifices he had made to align his life with his truth. Our bond had transformed, no longer romantic but rooted in deep respect and shared history. Friends noticed the shift too. Marcus hosted a small gathering where Damian joined without awkwardness, the group dynamic feeling like family forged in understanding rather than obligation. Sarah pulled me aside later, whispering, "You both look lighter. Whatever happened, it worked." It had. The misunderstandings that once fueled resentment had given way to empathy, the betrayals reframed as turning points. I had confronted my own tendencies to overcompensate, learning that love doesn't require fixing someone else's pain. Damian had faced his identity crisis head-on, sacrificing the security of family approval for authentic living. Together, apart, we had grown in ways the anniversary party could never have predicted. One evening in late April, as we walked along the Brooklyn waterfront watching the sunset paint the skyline, Damian turned to me. "Thank you for not hating me. Leaving that night was the hardest thing I ever did, but staying would have broken us both eventually." His words carried the weight of truth, and I nodded, the ring box long since tucked away in a drawer as a symbol of what could have been. We parted with a hug, promising to stay in touch as the friends we had become. Back at the apartment, now fully my own with new art on the walls and plants thriving in the windows, I felt a profound sense of closure. The journey from shock to strength had been mine to claim, and in claiming it, I had discovered that the real victim of that night hadn't been the one left standing alone. Damian had carried the deeper wounds, the one society and family carved silently over years, and his departure had been an act of courage that allowed healing for us both. Life continued its steady pace. Work projects that excited me, new friendships that enriched me, and a quiet confidence that came from knowing I could weather any storm. I volunteered more at the center, mentoring younger guys navigating their own coming-out journeys, passing on the lessons of resilience and self-compassion. The city, once a backdrop to our shared dreams, now felt like mine alone, full of possibility. On a warm May evening, standing on the same rooftop where it all began, this time for a friend's engagement party, I looked out over the glittering lights and smiled. The pain had faded into wisdom, the abandonment into appreciation for the man I had become. In the end, the choices we make in moments of crisis define not just our relationships but our very selves. Damian's walk away had been his sacrifice. My staying present with the hurt had been mine. And through it all, we both emerged whole. Is it true that the one who walks away from love always causes the most pain?